You wake up every single morning with that weight on your chest, that invisible burden that presses down on you before your feet even touch the cold floor. You check your bank account and feel the familiar sting of disappointment, the numbers staring back at you like an accusation, reminding you of all the dreams you have postponed, all the prayers that seem to hang unanswered in the silence. You have done everything they told you to do. You went to church. You tithed when you could barely afford it. You prayed with sincerity. You worked harder than anyone around you, and yet here you are, still struggling, still watching others pass you by, still wondering if God has somehow forgotten your address. You lie awake at night replaying every financial mistake, every missed opportunity, every bill that threatens to bury you, and you ask yourself the question that haunts every person who has ever struggled with money while holding on to faith. Does God actually want me to prosper, or is poverty somehow my cross to bear? I want you to understand something that took me decades to learn, something that transformed not only my financial life, but my entire understanding of what it means to walk in faith. The problem is not your circumstances. The problem is not the economy, not your job, not your education, not your background, not even the mistakes you have made. The problem is that you have been living as someone who is waiting for abundance, rather than someone who has already inherited it. You have been approaching God like a beggar at the gates, when He has already written your name in the family ledger. You have been praying for provision, while mentally rehearsing scarcity. You have been asking for blessing while your entire posture, your entire way of moving through the world screams that you expect nothing but struggle. And here is the truth that will set you free if you have the courage to receive it. You cannot attract what you believe you are unworthy to possess. You cannot manifest what you fundamentally expect to be denied. You cannot walk into the palace when you are still dressed in the rags of your old identity. The kingdom of abundance does not respond to words alone. It responds to the frequency of your being, to the deep conviction that pulses through every decision you make, to the unshakable knowing that you are already wealthy in spirit, and that the material expression of that wealth is simply a matter of alignment. What I am about to share with you is not positive thinking dressed up in religious language. This is not some prosperity gospel gimmick designed to separate you from your last dollar. This is the actual operating system of creation, the fundamental law that governs how reality responds to human consciousness, the secret that every wealthy person who ever lived has either discovered or stumbled into. This is the principle that built Standard Oil and funded more churches, hospitals, and universities than any single fortune in American history. This is the wisdom that allowed a boy from a poor family in rural New York to become the richest man the world had ever seen, not through luck, not through exploitation, but through an understanding of spiritual and financial laws that most people never glimpse in their entire lifetime. And here is what I need you to understand before we go any further. This principle works whether you believe it or not. It is operating in your life right now, this very moment, creating your circumstances according to the image you hold of yourself. The only question is whether you will continue to let it work against you, or whether you will finally take conscious command of the greatest power God has placed at your disposal. Let me pause here because I sense something happening as you listen to these words. There is a stirring in your spirit, a recognition that goes deeper than intellectual agreement. You have heard pieces of this before, perhaps in sermons that never quite landed, perhaps in self-help books that felt disconnected from your faith, perhaps in the quiet whispers of your own heart that you dismissed as wishful thinking. But something is different now. Something in you is ready, and I want to honor that readiness by asking you a direct question. What is the biggest lie you have believed about yourself and money? What is the story you have been telling yourself, perhaps for years, perhaps for your entire life, that has kept you locked in this cycle of struggle and survival? I want you to take a moment right now before we continue to drop down into the comments and share that lie. Write these words and then complete the sentence. The biggest lie I have believed about money is blank, and I am ready to release it because blank. I am asking you to do this not just for yourself, although this act of naming and releasing has more power than you can imagine. I am asking you to do this because your honesty might be the exact thing someone else needs to see. Your vulnerability might break the silence for another person who has been suffering alone, thinking they are the only one who struggles, thinking their financial challenges are somehow evidence of spiritual failure. When you comment, you become part of a community of transformation. You take the first step out of isolation and into the fellowship of people who are choosing to rewrite their stories. And I promise you this, I read every single comment, and the patterns I see help me create content that speaks directly to the real struggles you face. Your voice matters here. Your story matters. Do not scroll past this moment. Now let us examine what it actually means to live as if your blessing is already yours. This is not fantasy. This is not denial. This is not pretending you have money you do not have, or spending recklessly in some misguided attempt to trick the universe. That approach comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of the principle, and it has caused tremendous harm to people who genuinely want to grow. What I am describing is something far more profound and far more practical. It begins with understanding that there are two economies operating simultaneously in this world. There is the economy of appearances, which is what most people see and react to. This is the economy of bank balance, pay stubs, stock tickers, and credit scores. This is the economy that makes you feel rich when numbers go up and poor when they go down. This is the economy that most people live and die by, never realizing that it is merely the shadow of something greater. And then there is the economy of substance, the real economy that underlies and generates all material conditions. This is the economy of consciousness, of belief, of identity, of spiritual alignment. This economy operates according to laws as precise and predictable as gravity, but because these laws are invisible to physical sight, most people never learn to work with them. They spend their whole lives manipulating shadows, while the real levers of creation remain untouched. When I say live as if it is already yours, I am talking about shifting your primary residence from the economy of appearances to the economy of substance. I am talking about making your inner knowing more real to you than your outer circumstances. I am talking about developing such an unshakable conviction of your identity as an heir of infinite abundance that temporary conditions lose their power to define you. This is exactly what faith means in its operational sense. Faith is not hoping something might happen. Faith is not positive thinking with crossed fingers. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Do you understand what that scripture is actually saying? It is telling you that faith itself is substantial. It is telling you that the inner conviction, the mental image, the emotional certainty of your blessing is already evident. It already exists in the realm that matters most. The material manifestation is simply the trailing edge, the delayed echo of what has already been established in consciousness. Every building you have ever seen existed first as an idea, then as a blueprint, then as materials assembled according to that blueprint. The building did not create the vision. The vision created the building. And your financial life works exactly the same way. The circumstances you are living in right now are not creating your sense of limitation. Your sense of limitation created and is sustaining these circumstances. Change the blueprint and the building must follow. Let me tell you about a period in my early years that shaped everything I would later become. I was young, just starting out, and by any external measure, I had nothing. I was working as an assistant bookkeeper making a modest salary, living in a simple room, owning nothing of significance. But something within me knew with absolute certainty that my current position was not my destiny. I did not know exactly how things would unfold. I did not have a detailed map of the fortune that awaited me. But I had something more important than a map. I had an identity. Every morning before I went to work, I would spend time in contemplation and prayer, not begging God for opportunities, but thanking Him for the opportunities I knew were already mine. I would visualize myself as a man of means, not to escape my present reality, but to establish contact with my future reality. I would feel the weight of responsibility that comes with wealth, the sober seriousness of being a steward of significant resources. I would rehearse in my mind and heart the generous acts I would perform, the institutions I would fund, the lives I would touch. And here is what most people miss. I did not do this because I thought it would bring me wealth. I did this because I understood that it was the natural expression of who I already was in the eyes of God. The wealth was simply waiting for my consciousness to become capable of receiving and managing it. This is the key distinction that separates genuine faith from mere wishful thinking. Wishful thinking says, I hope this happens so I can become happy. Faith says, I know who I am in God, therefore I know what must manifest in my life. Wishful thinking starts from lack and tries to reach abundance. Faith starts from abundance and allows circumstances to rearrange themselves accordingly. Wishful thinking is anxious and grasping. Faith is calm and receptive. Wishful thinking exhausts itself in effort. Faith works through alignment. Do you see the difference? When you truly live as if your blessing is already yours, you are not performing some psychological trick. You are actually stepping into the truth of your spiritual inheritance. You are aligning your human consciousness with divine reality. You are allowing the infinite supply that has always been available to finally flow through the channel of your own receptivity. And this is why it works. It works because it is true. It works because abundance is the natural state of the universe. It works because scarcity is the illusion, and plenty is the reality. It works because you were created by an infinite creator who placed no limits on what his children could receive, except the limits they place on themselves through the poverty of their own belief. Consider for a moment how the wealthy think differently from the poor, and I mean wealthy not just in money but in spirit, in energy, in the richness of their experience. A person who is truly wealthy in consciousness walks into a room differently. They speak differently. They make decisions differently. They negotiate differently. They attract opportunities differently, not because they are faking confidence they do not feel, but because their internal reality is one of sufficiency and overflow. They are not trying to get something from the world. They are looking for ways to contribute to the world. They are not approaching every interaction as a test of whether they will be accepted or rejected. They already know they belong. They are not gripping tightly to what they have out of fear of loss. They hold everything loosely because they know more is always coming. This energy, this frequency, this way of being in the world is magnetic. It draws resources, relationships, and opportunities like iron filings to a magnet. And here is what religion often misses. This is not separate from spirituality. This is spirituality in action. This is what it looks like when someone actually believes what they say they believe about God's abundance and provision. The person who claims to trust in God's supply but lives in constant anxiety about money is experiencing a gap between their stated beliefs and their actual convictions. And the universe responds not to what we say, not to what we think we believe, but to what we actually believe at the deepest level of our being. So how do you close that gap? How do you move from intellectual agreement with these principles to the embodied knowing that actually transforms your life? This is where the practical work begins, and I want to give you specific practices that you can implement starting today. The first practice is what I call morning identity establishment. Before you check your phone, before you look at any news, before you engage with the external world in any way, you must spend time establishing your identity as an heir of abundance. This is not optional. This is not something you do when you feel like. This is the most important appointment of your day because it sets the frequency from which all your other activities will operate. During this time, you are not asking for anything. You are declaring who you are. You might say something like, I am a beloved child of the Most High God, and everything the Father has is mine. I am a channel of infinite abundance. I am worthy of wealth because I am committed to using wealth for the glory of God and the service of humanity. Money flows to me easily and consistently because I have prepared myself to receive it and deploy it wisely. The specific words matter less than the feeling state they create. You are trying to establish contact with the version of yourself that already exists in divine mind, the fully realized, fully prosperous, fully generous version of yourself that is your destiny. When you can feel that identity as more real than your current circumstances, you have successfully completed your morning practice. The second practice involves transforming your relationship with money that is already in your life, regardless of how small the amount might be. Most people who struggle financially have a complicated, often shameful relationship with money. They avoid looking at their accounts. They feel guilty when they spend, and anxious when they save. They oscillate between impulse purchases that bring temporary relief and episodes of fear-based restriction that feel like punishment. This relationship must be healed before greater wealth can flow. You must begin treating every dollar that passes through your hands as sacred, not in a miserly, hoarding way, but in a reverential, grateful way. When you receive income, no matter how modest, receive it with genuine thanksgiving. Hold it in your awareness as evidence of the supply that is always available to you. When you spend with intentionality and without guilt. Bless the money as it leaves you, knowing that you are participating in the great circulation of abundance that keeps the economy of the universe flowing. When you give, and you should always be giving even from your place of apparent lack, Give with joy and expectation of increase. The principle of sowing and reaping is not a budget hack. It is a spiritual law as reliable as the rising of the sun. You will never outgive God, but you must give from faith rather than from fear. The third practice is perhaps the most challenging but also the most powerful. You must begin making decisions from the identity of the wealthy person you are becoming, rather than the struggling person your circumstances say you are. This does not mean being reckless or irresponsible. It does not mean spending money you do not have on things you do not need. It means recognizing that every decision you make is a vote for who you are becoming. When you face a choice, ask yourself, what would the version of me who is already financially free choose in this situation? Sometimes that person would invest in something that stretches you. Sometimes that person would walk away from a bad deal that your scarcity mind wants to grab out of desperation. Sometimes that person would give generously when your fear wants to hoard. Sometimes that person would save diligently when your instant gratification urges want to spend. The point is not to follow a rigid rule. The point is to consult your higher self, the self that lives in the economy of substance, and allow that consultation to inform your decisions in the economy of appearances. There is a fourth practice that I have rarely shared publicly because it is so counterintuitive that most people reject it before giving it a genuine chance, but I believe you are ready to hear it. You must develop the practice of celebrating other people's wealth and success with genuine joy, not forced positivity, not jealousy masked as approval, but real, heartfelt celebration. When you see someone driving a beautiful car, bless them. When you hear about someone receiving a promotion or a windfall, rejoice as if it were your own good fortune. When you witness success in any form, let it serve as evidence that abundance is possible, that the universe is generous, that there is more than enough for everyone. Here is why this practice is so transformative. Most people have an unconscious belief that there is a limited amount of good in the world and that someone else's success means less for them. This belief, though rarely stated explicitly, poisons their relationship with abundance at the root. It causes them to secretly resent the prosperity of others, and that resentment creates a vibrational barrier that repels the very wealth they desire. When you genuinely celebrate the success of others, you are declaring to the universe that you believe in unlimited supply. You are aligning yourself with the frequency of abundance. You are dissolving the unconscious barriers that have been blocking your own prosperity. This is not about denying the existence of inequality or injustice. Those are real problems that require real solutions. This is about your personal relationship with wealth, about ensuring that your own consciousness is not contributing to your experience of lack. Let me address something that I know is arising in the minds of some of you, because it arose in my own mind many years ago before I understood these principles fully. Some of you are wondering whether this focus on wealth and prosperity is truly aligned with Christian values. You have heard sermons about the camel and the eye of the needle. You have read about the dangers of serving mammon. You have perhaps even been taught that there is something inherently more spiritual about poverty, that wanting financial abundance is somehow evidence of weak faith or worldly attachment. I understand these concerns, and I want to speak to them directly because getting this wrong can either lead you into destructive greed or keep you locked in unnecessary suffering. Neither of these outcomes glorifies God. First, let us be clear about what the scriptures actually teach, not what tradition has sometimes added to them. The warning about the rich man and the eye of the needle is a warning about attachment, about placing your identity and security in material things rather than in God. It is not a blanket condemnation of wealth. If it were, we would have to explain why so many of the great figures of faith, Abraham, Job, David, Solomon, were blessed with extraordinary riches. We would have to explain why Proverbs is filled with wisdom about the proper acquisition and management of wealth. We would have to explain why the principle of sowing and reaping, which applies directly to financial increase, runs throughout the entire biblical narrative. The danger is not wealth itself. The danger is wealth that displaces God, wealth that becomes an idol, wealth that is pursued through injustice or held with a closed fist. This is why I emphasize the importance of identity. When your identity is rooted in being a child of God, when your security comes from divine relationship rather than account balances, then wealth becomes simply a tool for service, a resource for generosity, a means of expanding your impact. It adds nothing to your essential worth because that worth was already infinite. It threatens nothing in your spiritual life because your spiritual foundation is not dependent on external conditions. Second, consider the practical reality of what poverty actually does to a person's ability to serve. I have known many sincere believers who were so consumed by financial survival that they had no energy left for ministry, no margin for generosity, no capacity for the kind of long-term thinking that significant kingdom work required. They were so busy trying to keep the lights on that they could not bring any light to the world. Meanwhile, I have seen what sanctified wealth can accomplish. I have seen hospitals built, universities founded, missionaries supported, orphans fed, justice initiatives funded, all because someone understood that money is not evil, but neutral, a force that takes on the character of the person who wields it. In the hands of someone whose heart is right with God, wealth becomes a powerful instrument of blessing. The question is not whether you should want wealth. The question is what kind of person you are becoming as you seek it, and what you will do with it when it arrives. Third, and this is crucial, the spiritual laws of abundance that I am describing are not alternatives to grace, faith, or reliance on God. They are expressions of these things. When you live as if your blessing is already yours, you are not engaging in some self-help technique that bypasses divine provision. You are actually exercising the deepest form of faith, the kind that calls things that are not as though they were, the kind that speaks to mountains and expects them to move. The reason these principles work is because God designed a universe that responds to faith. He created laws of consciousness and manifestation that reward those who align with them. Working with these laws is not working against God. It is cooperating with the very principles He established. To reject these laws because they seem too practical or too focused on results is to misunderstand the nature of a God who is interested in every detail of your life, including your finances. Now, I want to speak about something that will determine whether everything I have shared with you actually transforms your life or becomes just another piece of information that you heard and forgot. The difference maker is consistency. The wealthy do not think about wealth occasionally. They are wealthy in their self-concept every day, in every situation, regardless of what is happening in their external circumstances. This is not natural for most people. We are conditioned to let our circumstances determine our state, to feel rich when things are going well and poor when they are not. Breaking this conditioning requires sustained effort. You will not undo decades of scarcity programming in a single morning of declaration. You will not rewire your deepest beliefs about yourself and money in a week or even a month. This is a practice, in the same way that physical exercise is a practice. You do not go to the gym once and expect to have a new body. You go consistently, progressively, even when you do not feel like it, even when results seem slow, because you understand that transformation is cumulative. The same is true for the transformation of your financial consciousness. I recommend that you approach this as you would any serious spiritual discipline. Create a structure that supports your practice. Perhaps you set aside specific time each morning for your identity establishment work. Perhaps you journal about your relationship with money and track the shifts in your consciousness over time. Perhaps you find a community of people who are on the same journey, who can encourage you when you waver and celebrate with you when breakthrough comes. The specific structure matters less than your commitment to it. What matters is that you stop treating this as optional, as something you will get around to when you have time, as a nice idea that you might try someday. What matters is that you recognize this as the most important work you can do if you want to break free from financial struggle, because until you change your inner reality, your outer reality will continue to mirror the old patterns, no matter how hard you work, how much you learn, or how sincerely you pray. Let me share with you what happens when these principles take root, not to boast, but to give you a vision of what becomes possible. When you begin to live from the identity of abundance, opportunities start appearing that you could not have manufactured through any amount of effort or strategy. The right people show up at the right time. Ideas come to you that solve problems you did not even know how to articulate. Resources align in ways that feel miraculous, but are actually the natural result of your changed frequency. You find yourself taking actions that your old self would have been too afraid to take, not because you have become reckless, but because you have developed a deep trust in the supply that supports you. You notice that money seems to flow more easily, not because you are working harder, but because you have removed the internal resistance that was blocking it. You discover that generosity becomes natural, even joyful, because you no longer operate from a belief in limitation. You watch your circumstances transform, and while the transformation may not be instant, while there may be challenges along the way, you navigate those challenges from a completely different place. You are no longer a victim of your financial situation. You are a powerful co-creator with God, consciously shaping your reality according to divine principles. I want to take this moment to speak directly to you about something important. If you have made it this far in this message, you are not here by accident. Something in your spirit recognized truth in these words, even if your logical mind is still raising objection. Something in you is ready for change. Real change, not just a temporary improvement, but a fundamental shift in how you relate to money and abundance. I want to invite you to become part of this community in a deeper way. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, I want you to understand what that subscription represents. It is not about numbers for me, it is about commitment for you. When you hit that subscribe button, you are making a statement to yourself and to the universe that you are serious about this transformation. You are declaring that you will not settle for occasional inspiration, but will pursue consistent growth. You are joining a family of people who are walking this path together, supporting each other, learning from each other, celebrating victories together. And when you hit that notification bell, you are ensuring that you do not miss the messages that are designed to meet you exactly where you are in your journey. I am committed to bringing you practical, grounded, spiritually sound teaching on building wealth God's way. I am committed to addressing the real obstacles you face, not with empty platitudes, but with principles that have been tested in the crucible of actual experience. I am committed to your transformation, and I hope you will commit to it with me. Let me turn now to one of the most common obstacles that prevents people from living in the identity of abundance, even when they intellectually understand these principles. That obstacle is unworthiness. Deep down, beneath all the surface-level beliefs about money and spirituality, many people carry a fundamental conviction that they do not deserve to prosper. This conviction often has roots in childhood, in messages received from family, church, or society, that somehow linked being good with being poor, or that suggested wealth was only for certain kinds of people, or that created shame around desire itself. This unworthiness is insidious because it operates below conscious awareness. You can recite affirmations about abundance all day long, but if your core belief is that you are not worthy of prosperity, your unconscious will sabotage every attempt at increase. It will cause you to make inexplicable financial mistakes, to push away opportunity, to spend compulsively to confirm your belief in lack, to give inappropriately out of guilt rather than generosity. Healing this wound is essential work. The good news is that you do not have to psychoanalyze every childhood experience to find freedom. You can address unworthiness directly through spiritual means. The foundation is understanding, really understanding at the deepest level, that your worth is not something you earn. It was established before you took your first breath. You are worthy of abundance not because of anything you have done or failed to do, but because you were created by love, for love, as an expression of love. You are a child of the Most High, and everything the Father has is yours by inheritance, not by achievement. When you read in Scripture that God wishes above all things that you prosper and be in health even as your soul prospers, this is not a conditional promise. It is a statement of divine intent, of God's actual desire for you. When you read that it is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom, this is not a future hope, but a present reality waiting for your reception. The kingdom, with all its abundance, has already been given. The only question is whether you will receive it, and you cannot receive what you believe you do not deserve. A practice that has been transformative for many people is to spend time specifically meditating on their worth in God's eyes, not analyzing it, not trying to earn it, just receiving it. Sit in the presence of divine love and let yourself be valued. Let yourself be seen as precious. Let yourself be wanted, not for what you can produce, but for who you are. This is not indulgence. This is spiritual medicine for the wound of unworthiness that keeps so many people locked in poverty while claiming to follow a God of infinite supply. As you do this practice, you may notice emotions arising: old pain, old shame, old messages from voices that told you that you were not enough. Let these arise without resistance. They are coming up to be healed. Hold them in the light of divine love and let them dissolve. You do not have to fix them or figure them out. You just have to be present with them in the context of unconditional acceptance. This is the inner alchemy that transmutes the lead of unworthiness into the gold of authentic self-value. Now let us talk about action, because I do not want anyone to walk away from this message thinking that living as if means sitting around visualizing while neglecting practical steps. Nothing could be further from the truth. The wealthy do not just think differently, they act differently. Their actions flow from their beliefs, but the actions are real and often demanding. When I was building my business, I worked with an intensity that most people could not sustain. Not because I believed hard work alone would make me wealthy, but because my vision of who I was required that level of engagement. I saw myself as a master builder, and master builders do not loaf. I saw myself as a steward of significant resources, and stewards take their responsibilities seriously. I saw myself as someone who would fund great works, and that person could not afford to waste time on trivialities. My identity drove my actions, and my actions reinforced my identity. This is the virtuous cycle that transforms lives. What does this look like practically? It means that as you do the inner work of shifting your identity, you simultaneously look for ways to expand your skills, increase your value, and position yourself for opportunity. It means you stop wasting time on entertainment that numbs but does not nourish. It means you become a student of wealth, studying how money actually works, how businesses grow, how investments compound. It means you take calculated risks that your old self would have avoided. It means you invest in yourself, whether through education, coaching, or experiences that stretch your capacity. It means you show up every day with the professionalism and excellence of someone who knows they are destined for great things, even if your current role seems beneath your potential. This is not about hustling from a place of desperation. This is about expressing your identity through focused, purposeful engagement with the world. When you combine inner transformation with outer excellence, you become unstoppable. Let me address the issue of patience, which is often misunderstood in discussions of manifestation and abundance. Some teachers suggest that results should be almost instantaneous, that if you get your consciousness right, the money should flow immediately. This can create tremendous frustration and even cause people to abandon principles that actually work. The reality is that manifestation happens according to divine timing, which takes into account factors that we cannot see from our limited perspective. Sometimes the delay is because you need more time to develop the capacity to handle what is coming. Sometimes it is because other pieces need to fall into place. Sometimes it is because the journey itself is producing something valuable in your character that instant results would bypass. This does not mean you should resign yourself to endless waiting. It means you should hold your vision with faith while remaining unattached to specific timelines. The wealthy understand the difference between patience and passivity. They plant seeds and trust the harvest will come, but they do not dig up the seeds every day to check on progress. They do the work, maintain the faith, and allow the universe to unfold according to its wisdom. A powerful reframe is to recognize that every day you spend in the identity of abundance, even before material results appear, you are already wealthy in the most important sense. You are wealthy in consciousness, which is the only wealth that cannot be taken from you. You are wealthy in faith, which connects you to infinite supply. You are wealthy in the peace that comes from knowing you are aligned with divine purpose. The external manifestations will come. They always do for those who persist. But even before they come, you are not waiting to be wealthy. You are already expressing wealth from the inside out. This understanding removes the desperate, grasping energy that actually repels prosperity. It allows you to move through your days with a quality of presence that attracts resources naturally. I want to share something about generosity because this is where many people get confused. There is a teaching in some circles that you must give in order to get, as if generosity were a technique for manipulating universal laws. This approach can work at a superficial level, but it misses the deeper truth. True generosity, the kind that opens the floodgates of abundance, is not a strategy. It is an expression of identity. When you truly know yourself as wealthy in consciousness, giving becomes as natural as breathing. You are not trying to trigger a return. You are simply overflowing. The return comes, often multiplied, but it comes as a byproduct rather than an objective. This might seem like a subtle distinction, but it makes all the difference. Giving from a strategy mindset keeps you in the consciousness of manipulation, of trying to get something. Giving from an overflow mindset keeps you in the consciousness of abundance, of having more than enough to share. The universe responds very differently to these two frequencies. Practical guidelines for giving include always giving from a place of joy rather than guilt or obligation. If you cannot give with gladness, it is better to examine why before proceeding. Give consistently rather than sporadically, because consistency reinforces your identity as a giver. Give in proportion to your faith, stretching yourself enough to activate trust, but not so much that you create genuine hardship. Give to causes and people that genuinely resonate with your values, not just to the loudest request. And never, ever give what you do not have in an attempt to prove your faith. That is presumption, not faith, and it often leads to resentment and difficulty. The tithe, the practice of giving 10% of your income, is a wonderful starting point that has been blessed throughout history. But it is a floor, not a ceiling. As you grow in prosperity and in consciousness, you may find yourself called to give far more generously, not because you should, but because you cannot help it. Your cup will overflow, and you will look for containers to receive the excess. Let me tell you about the principle of circulation, which is the economic dimension of the spiritual truth that there is no life in stagnation. Money that does not move is money that does not grow. This is true at the individual level and at the cosmic level. The universe is a system of continuous flow, of giving and receiving, of exhaling and inhaling. When you hoard, you cut yourself off from this flow. When you spend with wisdom and give with generosity, you participate in it. Many people who struggle financially have some form of blockage in their circulation. Perhaps they grip too tightly to what they have. Perhaps they feel guilty about spending on themselves and therefore resist receiving. Perhaps they have given so much from obligation that they have drained themselves and now fear any outflow. Whatever the specific pattern, healing the circulation restores abundance. A practical way to work with this is to ensure that every dimension of your financial life is flowing. Income is flowing to you, and you receive it with thanksgiving. Savings are growing, representing a reservoir of security and opportunity. Spending is happening, directed toward your genuine needs and values. Giving is occurring, connecting you to the larger circulation of the universe. Each of these channels should feel open and healthy. If any feels blocked, examine what beliefs or emotions might be causing the blockage and address them with the tools I have described. You might find that you are wonderful at giving but terrible at receiving, or that you save compulsively but never invest, or that you spend freely but never plan. Each imbalance has a spiritual and psychological root. Addressing the root heals the imbalance. I want to turn now to the subject of financial wisdom, because living in the identity of abundance is not the same as ignoring practical money management. The wealthy are wealthy partly because they understand how money works. They know about compound interest, about asset allocation, about the difference between assets and liabilities. They know about tax strategy and estate planning and business structure. They do not consider this knowledge unspiritual. They consider it essential stewardship. If you are weak in financial knowledge, this is an area for growth, not so that you can worship money through expertise, but so that you can serve money's purpose through competence. Read books on personal finance. Understand the basics of investing. Learn how successful businesses are built. Study the habits of people who have created lasting wealth. This knowledge will combine with your spiritual practice to create a powerful synthesis. You will find that as your consciousness shifts, you become more able to absorb and apply practical financial wisdom. The inner and outer work reinforce each other. A specific application of this is the importance of building assets, things that put money in your pocket rather than take it out. Most people spend their lives accumulating liabilities, possessions that depreciate and drain resources while providing no return. The wealthy focus on assets, on investment, on building business, on acquiring cash-flowing real estate, on creating intellectual property that generates passive income. This is not greed. This is wisdom. An asset is a tool that works for you while you sleep, that frees your time for higher purpose, that eventually generates enough to cover all your needs and more. I am not suggesting you need to become a real estate mogul or a business tycoon. I am suggesting that your financial strategy should include some focus on building things that appreciate and produce, not just consuming things that depreciate and cost. Even modest investment, consistently made over time, can compound into significant wealth. Even a small side business, thoughtfully grown, can become a meaningful income stream. The key is starting, maintaining, and combining these practical steps with the consciousness work that amplifies everything you do. Let me speak about legacy, because this is something the wealthy think about that rarely crosses the mind of someone struggling to survive. When you are worried about next month's rent, it is hard to think about the impact you will leave after you are gone. But part of living as if is taking on the perspective that sees beyond immediate need. What kind of financial foundation do you want to leave for your children and grandchildren? What causes and institutions do you want to support in perpetuity? What example do you want to set that will ripple through generations? These are not questions for later, when you finally have money. These are questions for now, because the answers shape who you become and therefore what you attract. When I was young and had nothing material, I already thought in terms of legacy. I imagined the foundations I would create, the schools I would fund, the lives I would touch through strategic giving. These were not fantasies meant to escape present reality. They were visions that shaped my identity, and therefore my future. I encourage you to do the same. Write down what you want your financial legacy to be. Be specific and bold. Let this vision pull you forward. Another dimension of legacy is the transmission of values and knowledge to the next generation. Wealth that is merely passed down as dollars often disappears within 3 generations, but wealth that is accompanied by wisdom, by a set of principles and practices for living prosperously, can compound across time. This is why I spend so much energy teaching. I have lived long enough to see fortunes rise and fall, to see families who received vast inheritances squander them, and families who received nothing build empires. The difference is almost always in the consciousness, in the value, in the understanding of what wealth actually is, and how it is cultivated and preserved. If you have children, part of your responsibility is to teach them these principles, not as abstract philosophy, but as lived practice. Let them see you managing money wisely. Let them hear you talk about abundance and stewardship. Let them participate in giving and saving and thoughtful spending. This is inheritance that cannot be taxed, that cannot be lost in a market crash, that compounds indefinitely. I want to address a concern that sometimes arises when people begin this journey. They worry that focusing on wealth will make them somehow worse as human beings, that they will become greedy or self-centered or lose touch with what matters. This is a legitimate concern because we have all seen examples of people who seem to lose their souls in the pursuit of money. But I want to suggest that these examples represent corruption, not inevitability. The problem was not that these people pursued wealth, but that they pursued wealth as a substitute for meaning, as an end in itself, as a way to fill inner emptiness that can only be filled by spiritual connection. When you pursue wealth as a tool for service, as an expression of your identity as a child of God, as a means of expanding your positive impact on the world, it actually improves your character rather than corrupting it. It forces you to grow, to become more disciplined, more patient, more wise. It gives you resources to express your generosity more fully. It frees your time and energy for contribution rather than survival. The key is keeping the order right. God first, then purpose, then wealth as a means of serving purpose. When this order is maintained, abundance becomes a blessing to everyone it touches. As we approach the conclusion of this message, I want to bring us back to the central truth that everything else rests upon. You are already an heir of infinite abundance. This is not a metaphor. This is not positive thinking. This is the spiritual reality of who you are. Every limitation you have ever experienced was imposed not by God, but by belief, and belief can be changed. Every scarcity you have ever known was a teacher pointing you toward the truth that you are more than your circumstances. Every financial struggle has been preparing you to receive the wisdom that will set you free. The question is not whether abundance is available to you. It is always available, flowing like an infinite river that never runs dry. The question is whether you will open yourself to receive it, whether you will do the work of transforming your consciousness from scarcity to plenty, whether you will persist through the challenges and delays until your outer world catches up with your inner reality. I believe you are ready. I believe that something in you has been waiting for this message, perhaps for years. I believe that the fact you are here, engaging with this content, asking these questions, is evidence that your breakthrough is near. But I also know that knowledge without application changes nothing. Information without implementation is just entertainment. So I want to issue you a challenge. For the next 30 days, I challenge you to practice these principles with total commitment. Do the morning identity work every single day without exception. Transform your relationship with whatever money you have. Make decisions from the consciousness of abundance. Celebrate the success of others with genuine joy. Address any feelings of unworthiness that arise. Take inspired action toward your financial goals. Give consistently and joyfully. Study wealth and become financially wise. Hold a vision of your legacy. Do all of this not as a test to see if it works, but as a declaration of who you are. Do it because you have decided to stop living as a beggar and start living as an heir. Do it because you are done with the old story of lack and ready to write a new story of overflow. If you will take this challenge, I promise you that something will shift. It may be dramatic and visible, or it may be subtle and internal, but something will change because the laws I have described are as reliable as gravity. You cannot engage them sincerely and remain unchanged. And as you change, as your consciousness transforms, you will become a beacon for others who are struggling in the darkness of financial fear. You will have something to offer that cannot be gained from books alone. You will have the testimony of your own experience, the proof of your own transformation. This is the ripple effect that changes the world, one awakened consciousness at a time. I want to thank you for staying with me through this entire message. I know it was long. I know it asked a lot of your attention. But some truths cannot be compressed into sound bites. Some transformations require sustained engagement. If you have made it here, you have demonstrated the kind of commitment that success requires. Honor that commitment by continuing the journey. Subscribe if you have not already, and turn on notifications so you never miss what is coming next. Leave a comment sharing what this message has stirred in you, what commitments you are making, what challenges you are facing. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who is struggling with the same sense of financial frustration you may have felt. And most importantly, take action today. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when conditions are right. Today. The only moment you have is this one, and this one is sufficient for beginning. You were created for abundance. It is your birthright, your inheritance, your destiny. The only thing standing between you and the prosperity you seek is an old identity that no longer serves you. Let it die. Step into the truth of who you really are. Live as if your blessing is already yours, because it is. It always has been. You have simply been too blinded by the illusion of lack to see it. But now you see, now you know, and now everything changes. May the God of infinite abundance bless you beyond your wildest expectations. May your storehouses overflow and your cup run over. May you become a channel of such generous blessing that everyone who encounters you is lifted. And may you know, in the depths of your being, that you are worthy of every good thing that is coming your way. It is already yours. Go live like it. Before you go, I want to leave you with some final thoughts that have sustained me through decades of building and giving. These are not just principles but lived realities that have been tested in the furnace of experience. First, understand that the journey of financial transformation is also a journey of spiritual deepening. You cannot separate the two. As you grow in your understanding of abundance, you will find yourself growing in your understanding of God. As you release limiting beliefs about money, you will find yourself releasing limiting beliefs about divine love. The work is one work, and it leads to the same destination, freedom. Second, remember that setbacks are not evidence that these principles do not work. Setbacks are invitations to deepen your practice, to examine what beliefs might still be operating beneath the surface, to refine your approach. I have faced setbacks that would have broken a person operating from the old consciousness. Markets crashed, partners betrayed, entire industries transformed overnight. But because my identity was not dependent on circumstances, because my confidence was rooted in divine relationship rather than account balances, these setbacks became stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. They forced me to innovate, to adapt, to discover resources within myself that easier times would never have revealed. Do not curse your challenges. Let them teach you what they came to teach. Third, surround yourself with people who support your growth. The 5 people you spend the most time with have an enormous influence on your consciousness, whether you realize it or not. If you spend your time with people who are steeped in scarcity thinking, who complain constantly about money, who criticize the wealthy and suspect anyone who desires prosperity, their frequency will pull at yours. Seek out people who understand these principles, who are walking this path, who can encourage you when you waver and celebrate with you when you advance. This does not mean abandoning old friends or being arrogant about your growth. It means being intentional about the influences you allow into your consciousness. You are building something precious. Guard it. Fourth, develop a practice of gratitude that goes beyond pleasant feelings. Gratitude is one of the most powerful frequency shifters available to you. But I am not talking about casual thankfulness or superficial positivity. I am talking about the kind of deep, specific, embodied gratitude that recognizes even the smallest blessings as evidence of abundance. When you receive income, no matter how small, pause and genuinely thank God. When you pay a bill, be grateful that you have both the bill and the ability to pay it. When you give, appreciate the fact that you have something to give. This constant practice of recognition keeps you tuned to the frequency of abundance. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. The more grateful you are, the more you notice to be grateful for, and the more abundance flows to match your perception. Fifth, understand the power of rest. This might seem counterintuitive in a message about building wealth, but rest is essential to prosperity. Not the kind of rest that comes from laziness or avoidance, but the kind that comes from trust. The Sabbath principle is not just a religious rule. It is a spiritual law that recognizes human beings are not machines. We need periods of stepping back, of allowing the soil of our consciousness to lie fallow, of simply being rather than constantly doing. In these times of rest, something happens beneath the surface. Integration occurs. Clarity emerges. The next steps become apparent. I have had some of my most valuable insights not while working, but while walking in nature, sitting in silence, or simply allowing my mind to wander without agenda. The wealthy know how to work hard, but they also know how to rest deeply. Both are essential. Sixth, keep your vision alive through regular revisiting. The vision you created of your financial future, your legacy, your contribution, needs to be nurtured. It is not enough to write it down once and forget it. Schedule time regularly, perhaps weekly, to reconnect with your vision. See it vividly, feel it emotionally, let it motivate and guide you. As you grow, your vision may expand or evolve. That is natural and healthy, but never let it fade into the background. Your vision is the blueprint your consciousness uses to construct your reality. Keep it clear, keep it compelling, keep it alive. Seventh, develop the habit of asking better questions. Most people ask questions that presuppose limitation. How can I pay this bill? Why is money always tight? When will I catch a break? These questions program your mind to look for evidence of scarcity. Wealthy thinkers ask different questions. How can I create more value? What would make this situation serve my growth? What opportunity is hiding in this challenge? How can I help more people and thereby increase my income? The questions you ask direct your attention, and your attention shapes your experience. Train yourself to ask questions that point toward possibility rather than problem. Eighth, embrace the identity of a creator rather than a consumer. Most people move through the world consuming, taking in content, buying products, using services. The wealthy think primarily in terms of creation, of producing value, of contributing to the world rather than merely extracting from it. This shift in orientation is profound. When you see yourself as a creator, every experience becomes raw material for something you will make. Every challenge becomes a problem you might solve for others. Every skill you develop becomes a potential offering to the marketplace. The world is hungry for people who create value, who solve problems, who contribute more than they take. Become one of these people, and abundance will chase you. Ninth, develop what I call financial courage. This is the willingness to take calculated risks in service of your vision, to invest in yourself and your dreams even when the outcome is not guaranteed, to step into opportunities that stretch you beyond your current comfort zone. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is action in the presence of fear. Every significant financial advance I have ever made required courage, required stepping into uncertainty, required trusting in principles even when circumstances screamed for retreat. The wealthy are not reckless, but they are brave. They understand that security and comfort are often the enemies of growth. They are willing to be temporarily uncomfortable in service of long-term prosperity. 10th, and finally, never forget that wealth is a means, not an end. The purpose of everything I have shared is not to help you accumulate money for its own sake. That would be a hollow victory, an empty achievement that would leave your soul starving even as your bank accounts overflow. The purpose is to free you to fulfill your purpose, to give you resources for contribution, to liberate you from the anxiety of survival so you can focus on the adventure of service. When wealth is properly understood as a tool, it takes its rightful place in your life. It serves you rather than enslaving you. It expands your options rather than limiting your choices. It becomes a source of joy rather than a cause of stress. This is the abundant life that was promised to you. This is the inheritance you were always meant to receive. I have given you everything I know about living in the identity of abundance. I have shared principles that transformed my own life and the lives of countless others. But knowledge alone changes nothing. The question now is what you will do with what you have received. Will you return to your old patterns, your old identity, your old relationship with money? Or will you step boldly into the truth of who you are? The choice is yours. It has always been yours, and heaven itself is watching to see what you will decide. Remember this, you are not just listening to a message, you are standing at a crossroads. One path leads back to the familiar territory of limitation, struggle, and survival. The other path leads forward into the unknown territory of abundance, purpose, and legacy. Both paths have costs. The first path costs you your potential. The second path costs you your comfort. But only one path leads to the life you were created to live. Choose wisely. Choose courageously. Choose as the heir you already are. Go now and live as if it is already yours, because it is. It always has been. And the moment you truly believe this, everything will find its way to you. Not because you have manipulated some universal law, but because you have finally aligned with the truth of your being. You have come home to the abundance that was waiting for you all along. Welcome home. Your inheritance awaits. The sun rises each morning not because we deserve it, but because it is the nature of the sun to shine. In the same way, abundance flows not because you have earned it through effort or proven yourself through suffering, but because it is the nature of God to give. You have been trying to earn what was freely given. You have been struggling to achieve what was already yours by birthright. Today, let that struggle end. Not because you have given up, but because you have woken up. Not because you have surrendered to poverty, but because you have surrendered to truth. The truth is that you were created for more. The truth is that limitations are illusions. The truth is that every promise of provision in sacred scripture was written with your name on it. Step into this truth. Live from this truth. And watch as everything you have ever needed finds its way to you, not through strain and desperation, but through alignment and faith. This is the way. This is the path. This is your moment. Take it.